Have you checked the children? Your little master.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime and Fuego, and if it please you, join me here for a bit of palaver on Hey-oh! Stephen Kizang, that is right, El Rey, my beloved Sai King, as you can see by the Tower of Tomes behind me. Obviously, welcome to the Horror Show. Bienvenidos, everybody, and this is the program I do every Tower Tuesday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, here in the States. And yes, this is one that I've been looking forward to reviewing for quite a while because it is the conclusion of the most recent Stephen King adaptation. And I covered the first episode, just gave some like first impressions sort of thing, and I've been really trying to do that from here on out with any new long form Sai King adaptation that debuts. So we did it with Lacey's story and you know, a couple others dating back, but I did the same thing with this adaptation of Salems Lot, starring Emily Hampshire, I want to say her name is, I just want to double check, yes. But most notably in the main role as Charles Boone, none other than Adrian Brody. We are talking the Salems Lot, very loose expansion slash adaptation entitled Chapelwaite. And the thing about this, especially, and just to give forewarning right here off the bat, this will be a spoiler review of the entire season. My thoughts about it, some pros, some cons, some alterations that they made, and once again, always a different turn of the wheel, different level of the tower of sorts when something Sai King is being adapted, whether it's a film theatrically released or whether, in this case, a short story that they incorporated elements from, certain characters, certain plot beats and stuff, but really made it their own. And it's usually for better or for worse. I guess it really depends the medium in a lot of cases, if it is more so for worse. Like, you've got stuff like that Miss TV series on Spike, which was just an awful turn of the wheel that I've still grown to find a little bit of appreciation for, I guess, like somehow, some way. And then, I mean, Lacey's story from earlier this year on Apple TV Plus I thought was great. And so, yeah, this is a interpretation of Sai King's source material that originally was published as a loose prequel to Salems Lot when Salems Lot, the short story, first appeared in Night Shift back in February of 1978. It was exclusive to that collection, his first collection of short stories that he had put out at the time, and that one was just so indebted to Bram Stoker and Dracula, most notably in the way that it was constructed, like the manner in which it was written, because it was a series of letters and journal entries and things of that nature, and our title person, Charles Boone, was living in the home of Chapelwaite, but it was really just him and like his servant, I guess. But he's hearing rats in the walls, he's slowly kind of going crazy, and he starts investigating some family-related stuff that ties in with this Book of the Worm and also with this nearby community of Salems Lot, or excuse me, Salems Lot. And yeah, so it really just expanded upon the main story of Salems Lot to really show that in this particular region in Maine, it had worked as an epicenter of evil for a very long time, for centuries at this particular point. And so, yeah, it was really just very much an offshoot despite being a prequel. And I love that short story. And I also really love One for the Road. All three of those stories, I think, connect together in an intriguing fashion. Whereas One for the Road was very much a little sequel epilogue to Salems Lot. Salems Lot was very much an offshoot and a vastly different sort of thing, especially with all that it was indebted to Lovecraft with, and even Poe, and those two specifically. But yeah, Chapelwaite is also very much its own thing, despite taking some of the flavor of both Salems Lot, the short story, and Salems Lot, and it almost kind of makes this intriguing Frankenstein of both of them. And so if you want like spoiler-free thoughts, once again, there is the first impressions of the initial pilot episode. That's been here on the channel for a few months now, but this is a 10-episode series that just concluded this past weekend on Epix. And so that's something I also have to preface this with, that I know a shitload of people do not have the Epix channel, although they are kind of gaining a little bit of esteem because they're working with Blumhouse on some original content going forward, and yet, yeah, really the only way that a lot of people can watch this show, especially outside of North America, I've heard it's very difficult. I don't know all of the specifics. I mean, unless you're using like a VPN to change your source location or whatever. But yeah, Epix, the same thing happened with Saint Maud, where Epix was the exclusive destination for that particular film. Great film, by the way, very disturbing, slow burn, upper echelon of this past year, if we're going to talk about it. But yeah, Epix was the destination for this, and I think it's in some ways a real shame because of the fact that this show's really good. Show's really good. It's definitely not going to be for everybody because of the fact that it does take place in the middle of the 19th century, and so if you are not into period pieces, especially in this particular time of history, you're probably not going to be as into it. I'm looking at you, Cecil. I love you, man. But yeah, he's not as big on stuff that is pre-1970s or whatever. But I have always enjoyed this sort of stuff. And it does give off a vibe that you probably got from... boy, I mean, there's been your fair share... I'm trying to think of like a series per se. I guess maybe Salem? You know, despite the fact that that TV series took place, you know, almost 100 years before. But it's of that from the costuming to the quality of the acting. But this is significantly better in every way, shape, or form. And not because of my affinity of the source material. Because this is, as I said, a bit of a departure. Not a drastic departure, but a very different expansion. And so we have Charles Boone, played by none other than Adrian Brody, as I mentioned, and he's an Oscar-winning actor, tremendous talent, and when he was initially attached to this, I was just like, damn, and like, color me intrigued, and he's terrific throughout this as the patriarch that you see at the very beginning of the first episode. You know, blood calls to blood, I think is what they say at one particular point. I'm just trying to double-check on the notes. Yeah, blood calls blood, son. You see him as a kid, Charles Boone, the Brody character, and his dad is going nuts. He attacks the mother, and he's trying to like bury his son alive. It's very harsh to watch, and there are a lot of harsh scenes throughout the entirety of this show, and not just of the violent variety, because this show, when we catch up with Charles Boone, all grown up, sadly, they're in the Sea of Japan, I believe, or somewhere, you know, off of the island. And yes, his wife has died, and she's an Eastern Asian, and they have these 3 children, 2 girls and 1 boy. The name's Tate, Loa, and Honor. And they have decided after the death of said mother and all of the just tragic stuff that has, been associated, obviously, with her sudden demise and leaving the island and her getting sick at sea and all of that. They're like, okay, we are going to go back to the States, and they have this home, this mansion practically in Chapelwaite that Charles' cousin Stephen has left to him. And so they get back there, and the biggest thing about this Preacher's Corner, I believe it's called, yes, Preacher's Corner, Maine, is the fact that when he shows up with his children that are very obviously mixtos, you know, they are not a pure bred, they have darker skin, and, you know, so on. They, like the family, they are double shunned because of the fact that, first and foremost, you've got the fact that they're very obviously racist, and so they see darker skinned kids there, and as you also find out when Charles connects with a character by the name of Abel, who was doing some work with the ledger for the mill that his cousin owned and also left to him along with the mansion of Chapelwaite. This community is very racist. Yeah, they see people that are not of Caucasian color, and it is just immediate shunning. And then the double down is the fact that the Boone family has been long reviled as well, and blamed / scapegoated for a lot of the problems within the community that have dated back like generations and generations. Like, you find out about Charles's grandfather, I think his great-grandfather, if I remember correctly, this guy James, and, you know, some murders that he did. And so there's a long line of not just mental instability with the Boone family, but also them being kind of, traced back to and connected from the community with all kinds of other horrible and reviled sort of stuff. So when you first get there in the initial episode, it's I talked at length about it, so I'm not going to focus too much, but it sets the stage for the type of difficulties that the family is going to endure, but yet you also get this character of Rebecca Morgan, who is an aspiring writer at a time where a lot of people didn't even think women could go to college, let alone be writers and have that prestige and so on. They were still very much looked down upon, which is obviously a travesty and terrible, but yeah, it's interesting the way she kind of gets in with the family. She becomes their new governess, and so she's helping them out with the rearing of the children and with other things, as far as just instruction, getting them to school and whatnot. Governess is like kind of a nicer term for like a nanny, I guess, is the best way that you could put it. But it's obviously needed because Charles has a business to run. He's trying to smooth things out as best he can with the resentfulness of the community, but yet also turn things around, and he's a very virtuous man. That's one thing that I will give a lot of credit to Adrian Brody's portrayal of the character, is that you can tell he is a man of deep conviction despite his personal demons, and his personal demons are both hereditary and also circumstantial. There's the death of his wife, but then there is also this lineage, and as he starts to try to figure out why certain things happened with all of them, he discovers the extent of the mental illness, and it's hinted at in the trailers, but dude, do you really find out about it as the series progresses? Because he is certain he hears rats in the wall, and an exterminator comes and is like, nah, we found some dead corpses and whatever, but there's no droppings, there's no rats living in your walls, dude, and so there's your Poe connection. And then this ties in with the whole stuff about the worms. And there is a very creepy pagan Latin connotation with the worms that as we learn more as the series progresses, because Charles is seeing worms, and it's apparently something that had been happening countless times over generations with pretty much everybody in his family, and he sees, like, he's chilling in, this, like, hot tub bath like sort of thing, and he's drinking his booze, and he thinks that he's like completely covered with these worms, and it's really gross and crazy. And so yeah, it just progresses, and when he goes and does the additional research that I mentioned, he finds out that he has had family members committed before, and he talks to the guy at this asylum, which is on an island away from the community of Preacher's Corner, and yeah, the doctor is basically like, yeah, I dealt with your family before, you should probably come here and stay with me. And so that sort of confirmation is incredibly frightening. But the other sort of fright, beyond the supernatural stuff that is being hinted at this particular point, is the fact that the kids in school, once the three children are there, are being picked on, and thankfully they're also pretty tough themselves. You would think if you've lived life at sea and been raised by, just very well-versed, pair of parents, that yeah, they're going to be smart, and they are definitely not like little wimps either, and they stand up to these bullies, but it's almost like an insurmountable sort of situation because pretty much the entire neighboring community is against them, and there's an All Hallows Eve bit in an episode, and they're going around trying to like just get candy or money, and they're like, nope, sorry. The people of the town are like, we're not going to give you anything. And so the intrigue really starts to build, though, when we veer away from that sort of prejudice and we get more into the fact that there are some mysterious killings going on, but there is also almost like a plague of sorts where people are being quarantined, and they are blaming this plague on the Boones. I think they call it the Boone pox at one particular point. That's what this super asshole, the guy who is leading the charge against the Boones, is one of the oldest members of the community. He was the former minister, and his daughter is actually married to the new current minister. And so this might be where I can definitely give some cons about this, because as much as I adored the predominance of the acting, even the assholes within the community, very convincing and everything. And I thought the kids were very solid, Loa especially, Tate was good, you know, Honor as well. I mean, all three of the kids were great. I really enjoyed the Rebecca character and the Abel character. As I said, there was pretty much two characters in the short story, and so I'm not going to continue any comparison there, really. I might, you know, blip in here or there, but this is very much its own thing in the dynamic of this, you know, family from away that comes in and just all of the, you know, hatred and prejudice that I had mentioned. But when some mysterious deaths start to go down, and then you start to kind of peel back the layers of what is actually really going on, because Charles thinks that both his cousin Stephen, who left him the property and the mill, you know, both the Chapelwaite and the business, and his, I guess it's his Uncle Philip, yeah, who is played by none other than, I forget the name of the actor. He was Death in Supernatural. He was also most recently in Anything for Jackson, but he's been in so much stuff. He's not in a shit ton of this, but when he is, he's very convincing. But there's members of the community, especially some of these that are sick with this plague of sorts, and they're claiming that they have seen Philip. They're claiming that they have seen Stephen. And it's not until the discovery transpires where they're down in the barn and they find that there's a tunnel. And there's this tunnel that goes into the mansion of Chapelwaite. And that's why you think you're hearing rats in the walls, because the tunnel leads into the mansion, and yet there's these hidden areas within the walls, these corridors that you find out Stephen and Philip have been utilizing. So they're not dead. Neither of them are dead. And as we reveal the secret of what has happened with them and how they are still alive despite these proverbial fake deaths, one having been a hanging presumably, and then the other one with Philip, the uncle, having just like walked into the ocean, you know, and never seen again. So this is where we veer significantly from the Jerusalem's Lot, like pagan, crazy, inbreeding stuff, and yet that's also happening. You know, there is a child that is born from this younger woman named Faith who is having an affair with the newer minister. He's a married man, as I said, and it's this inbred looking, like, I don't know, sunken face, and you know, there's aspects of the body that aren't completely formed, and so the sort of thing that anybody who is familiar with family members creating children together, this was what it would seem to be. And that's the kind of thing that you get in the Jerusalem's Lot short story when you find out about what that community was actually doing. And yet it also blends in the vampiric aspect that we later on get in Salem's Lot, the story, you know, when Barlow actually comes and stuff. And so, yeah, this community was obviously drawing all kinds of evils, including other vampires, which you find out about one who is in the community of Salem's Lot, which is nearby, which is an old mining town that has a Boone connection as well. His great grandmother or great aunt, something like that. I'm trying to remember, you know, the direct connection, but a family member of his was using that, you know, for mining at one particular point generations before. And so the Boone family had decade after decade, generation after generation of connections with these nasty hubs for all of this really ill shizzle. And you find out that there is this community of Jerusalem's Lot that's still going, and there are some vampires there, including one by the name of Jacob, who is straight up Nosferatu looking. The design of the character is great. I love when he's speaking Latin in one of the later episodes and just reading from this text that they eventually do track down. But then you also have a group of regular humans called the Promised, and the Promised are the group that are also in the town of Jerusalem's Lot, but they're essentially they're kind of like the familiars, you know, the Igors, the protectors of the vampiric that are at this community as well. And so the promise aspect is that one day they will be turned. And so that's where, and I guess that's with the familiars. I'm thinking of Guillermo on What We Do in the Shadows, and how he's just like, I was supposed to be a vampire so long ago. And then you find out what's actually going on with him, which is funny. But yeah, the promised are a bunch of bloodthirsty bastards as well, and bitches or whatever, but just nasty, nasty people. And you find out that Faith, the woman who had the deformed child and was, you know, the affair with the minister and everything, yeah, she was originally from that community, and so she has that connection. And there's a scene where she's talking with the younger new minister who she's had this affair with, and presumably had this child with, although you find out, nah, it wasn't hers, it was the head vampire's child. But where the scene where she is discussing how being fed upon, because this isn't like From Dusk Till Dawn lore where almost like zombies, you get bit and you're eventually going to turn. No, this is where they alter it a little bit, where you have to have, the drink and then, like the drinking of each other, so the vampire mythology. But you also have to be killed, and so you don't technically turn until you have died. You resurrect afterwards. So that's where it's altered just to the slightest degree and made its own. And I'm sure there's various other vampire tales that have incorporated the same mythology, and I just can't think of them off the top of my head. But it's not the first time I've heard of this, but they at least go a slightly different direction, which I thought was cool. But just hearing Faith talk about how it was one of the most invigorating experiences that she has ever had, being fed upon, and just the adrenaline rush, having these vampires drink her blood and just barely keep her alive. And yet that's another thing that they do in this, that if you've seen the second season, I believe it is, of Castlevania, it's either the second or the third season of the animated Castlevania on Netflix. The ultimate plan of this Jacob is that he wants to collect this book, and the book is what retains the connection with the short story Jerusalem's Lot. It's called De Vermis Mysteris, and it essentially translates to Mysteries of the Worm. And the followers of Jacob from this Jerusalem's Lot community that are trying to help him track down this book, which was actually stolen by those other two Boones, Stephen and his father Philip, who left the property to Charles, that they took that book and they were very intrigued with it themselves, and so they in turn were turned into vampires by the Jacob guide. Like, this is where it gets so dense, and there was so much going on just within these 10 episodes, and I could see some peeps being just wanting more violence, more, just carnage and whatever. When it comes, though, it is very effective. It is very well done. The show is shot a little too dark for me at times, because that's the thing. Most of the action takes place either at night or in these, because the whole community is overcast just about all the time, and so there's rarely, if any, sunshine throughout. But most of the attacks and some of the, sort of nefarious nastiness that goes down, it does happen at night. And I know that's tough for, lighting purposes. You don't want to shoot everything during the day and then color correct to make it look all bluish, grayish and shit. And so I was glad that they didn't do that here. But the Mysteries of the Worm, where you have that retained connection with the Jerusalem's Lot story, that is the key to basically bringing about, as one of the promised says, she's like, our God is older than yours. And to be fair, yeah, the gods of some of those pagans, like the ancient pagans, predates so much of Christianity, Judaism. I mean, it's really nuts. And so the apocalyptic craziness that would be brought out if this book gets back to Jacob, the main vampire leader or whatever of Jerusalem's Lot, is that it would basically bring about eternal darkness, and humans in the Castlevania connection that I was mentioning would be essentially relegated to like cattle for the ever-growing hordes of vampires to feed upon. Wouldn't kill all of them off because they would still want to feed. And so this isn't like total apocalypse, but just the end of the known world for regular humans, I guess, is what it would entail. And so, yeah, lots going on. We've got our fair share of flashbacks, giving some backstory to members of the Boone family before Charles returned to the scene in Preacher's Corner and stuff. And once again, just to double down, I really, really enjoyed this. I could see where, once again, some may think it drags a wee bit here and there, but I was just immensely impressed with so very much of it. And also, just to go into a few other things, I've already mentioned, the suicides, yeah, but there's a few lines that I really wanted to make mention of, because I feel like the writing, especially the dialogue, was pretty on point in this. I was more impressed early on, most notably in the initial episode where Charles gets there with his family and he's talking to the woman who had been like the housekeeper, and I don't know if she had the term of governess or not, but that nonetheless, when he finds out some information about the death of the death, because as I said, Stephen and Philip are not technically dead, but he gets there and he asks this housekeeper woman, he's like, how did he die? And referring to Stephen, and she's like, well, he died of grief because his daughter Marcella fell down the stairs and died. And you actually find out that that was tied in with the turning of both Stephen and Philip into vampires. And that scene where it's later in the series, we actually get what really happened and how Stephen still had an essence of conviction. And yet Philip, the father of Stephen, was very mad because that Book of the Worm, the Mysteries of the Worm, it had been hidden away by Marcella because she knew the power of it and she knew what the collective of them were trying to do. And so, yes, dead of grief. And Charles Boone, played by Adrian Brody, has a great line where he's like, we all carry grief, it's rarely fatal. I thought that was very, very solid writing. And then there was also another bit where the rumors are spreading about the fact that, you know, Stephen and Philip may actually not be dead, or, you know, because people are claiming to have seen them, and it's because they were jumping into these people's houses at night and drinking their blood, you know, just taking a little taste, so on and so forth. And so that's why all of these different people across the town that they were infected, you know, with the plague, and they were being quarantined and everything. Very timely, obviously, with the type of, like, the last year and a half that we've had, but the very asshole Pharisee, you know, holier than thou sort of dude who was the former minister, he says to the current minister at one particular point, if our Lord could raise Lazarus, Satan could surely raise Stephen Boone. And I thought that was really cool. And then there is another line that I have to mention, treating illness with faith doesn't give me comfort. And it was a little bit of criticism that was being heaped upon our main minister guy, the younger dude who's been having the affair and whatever, but he was trying to reassure those with, you know, seek guidance from the Lord and pray and all this other stuff. And members of the community of Preacher's Corner were like, nah, man, this is just like, how is praying going to help us? The skepticism was already seeping in. And that's because this community had been ravaged over the years. I mean, between the racism, the deformed child, there's also the mysterious deaths of a few people and disappearances and whatnot. But then there's also abandoned farms all around and just dead land and very few things that'll actually grow. And yet the prejudice of the community is even more apparent in the fact that, you know, they've hated the Boones for so many generations that they wouldn't even allow them when they died to be buried in the regular cemetery, so they're all buried right outside the mansion. I mean, these are very interesting little nuances that just show the divide and just the absolute loathing of this family that has been transpiring for so friggin' long. Yet, as people are finally starting to realize, okay, we have this neighboring community that is terrorizing us. When certain people start to really accept that there are vampires, you know, these undead, as they call them at various times. And we do have, similar to what happens in Salem's Lot, we have like a Ka-Tet that comes together. So you've got the minister, the younger one that I mentioned. You've got the constable whose wife is infected, his Mary. And then, yeah, you still have the three kids, and then Rebecca, and you see a mile away that there's going to be kind of a romantic sort of thing with her as the governess, and with the, you know, the widower in Charles Boone, and their chemistry is really good though. And Emily Hampshire, I keep forgetting her last name. She's great, although she does cause some division within the family in one of the later episodes when they find out that she has been writing about the history of their family, and she almost used working with them as an opportunistic way to just gain more information, more fodder for her story, which is called The Curse of the Boones. And yeah, Loa discovers it at one particular point, and she is so pissed off and turns the other kids against, and turns her father, Charles, against her too. But in turn, it just becomes that much more evident that there are bigger and more important things to be upset about. And so, yeah, you have that Ka-Tet that's ready to go after them, and yet they know that they don't have enough men. And so they fortify the Chapelwaite mansion when they think an attack is going down, because they have found the book and it is in their possession, and they refuse to give it to Jacob and those people so they can resurrect this slithering evil Lovecraftian, you know, and like, I don't know, old one, or, you know, older god, whatever the hell you want to call it. And so when they refuse to do that, you've got not only Stephen and Philip that come there to try to get it, but then you also have both the Promised and the vampires, including Jacob from Jerusalem's Lot, coming. So it turns into this big showdown, and they're holed up in the home, and there's everybody trying to break in and get to them. And when the carnage comes, the carnage comes. And when Philip gets killed by Charles, the decapitation that goes down is pretty hardcore, man, and I will give them mad creds for that. I thought that was good. And even when the other confrontation comes later, and I've hit all my notes, so I don't even need this anymore, but even when that final confrontation comes down where they have gone and rallied more men besides the constable and the younger minister to go into Jerusalem's Lot and just attack them head on, because they do get the book, and God, little Tate gives it to his sister. Oh, and I saw a mile away that the middle sister was going to get turned into a vampire. That was just, when you find her dead in at the end of episode 4 or 5, something like that, and they go and they bury her at sea, just like with the mother, and of course they're all just devastated and crushed and everything. But the thing is, I was just like, she's got to be a vampire, man. I mean, because she was being glamored and enticed by her Uncle Stephen. She was convinced, you know, that she could see her mother again, and that there is intrigue to life beyond what she had experienced. And she was already kind of like a bitter and sad kid from the rickets that she had, and, you know, some of the inability to walk and whatnot from that. But yeah, she gets turned, and she in turn gets the book from her youngest brother, all impressionable, and takes it, gives it to our main bad guy, Jacob. And the end of Life as Humans Would Know It is in the process of transpiring, but Charles Boone goes all mad heroic, and there's a lot of life lost in the fight with both the Promised and, just about all of them have been turned into vampires at that particular point. But we get beheadings, including the main bad guy, Jacob. We get stakings like a mofo. Not like a ton of them, but when we see them, they are gnarly and very convincing, very great practical. So props there. The big problem that I have with this, and it's probably the only major one, is that I didn't like the ending. I did not like the ending. And I understand Charles trying to be, like, you know, sacrificial to a degree and everything, but I didn't completely agree with the logic here. The logic was where I kind of scratched my head a little bit, because what he decides to do is first have his daughter, Loa, turn him into a vampire. So he drinks from her hand, and then he has her feed on him, and, you know, then he dies. And then while he is out, the doctor, who is one of the survivors, they take this Mysteries of the Worm, this book, and they cut him open and they put it in his body and sew him up, and then he reawakens as a vampire. But that's the thing, there is still, just like with Loa, there is a semblance of yourself that remains. So it's not like once you become a vampire, you are inherent evil and there's no way around that. No, you can... I guess Father Callahan didn't get completely turned. Anyway, that's a debate for a different day. But yeah, there's been lots of different stories of, like, these reluctant vampires and those that you're not just evil incarnate after being turned. And so, yeah, the big fear by Charles was that this book will have lots of others just like Jacob going after it. And there's no way around that. It will eternally happen. And so he saw himself as being somebody who needed to leave his family and protect the book and just almost be this wanderer of sorts. And at first I thought he was going to go out in the sunlight and have himself burn up, but then I remembered the scene where he tried to burn the book. He threw it in the fire and it wouldn't even burn. So it's obviously that evil of a text where it cannot be destroyed. It just needs to be hidden and protected. And that's why Marcella, the daughter of Stephen Boone, hid it in the first place, and, you know, in the graves. And so, yeah, Charles decides to leave his family, and it's a very tense and sad and emotional moment, especially where Tate, his son, is like, I'll see you again. Charles gets in the rowboat and goes off, but you have to think, you're like, yeah, it's going to be very difficult for him to, you know, keep himself protected. He's just going to have to be smart. That's not to say that he didn't give me any inclination or doubt that he wouldn't be smart and wouldn't be such a great protector, but he fakes his death. He wants everybody in not just that community, but anyone who knew those in Jerusalem's Lot or would try to track down, just like his cousin and his uncle did, both faking their deaths. He does the same thing, and then he is off to be just a wandering, lonesome protector of this text. And so, noble, I suppose, but I gotta think there could have been a different way aside from him leaving his family and everything, but I can see the motivation behind it, even if it wasn't as satisfying of an ending for me. Now, does this mean I think they're going to be doing a sequel? Hell to the Nizzo. I think this is very much a contained, limited series like we had with Lisi's story, and I think it would also give a bit of a disservice to just the melancholy and heart-wrenchingness of the ending and just the leaving of the family and all of that stuff. So leave it be, just don't touch it, and accept that. And also being Epix, I doubt this has been any sort of ratings giant or whatever. It's also available on Epix now. You can do a 7-day free trial and just binge all 10 episodes of this, and I would highly recommend it. This and Lisi's story were two top-notch adaptations, drastically different in comparison, with Chapelwaite being very, very gothic and a lot more brutal. That's for damn sure, especially once we did finally get some kills and stuff. So I was incredibly impressed, and I'm glad that for the first time in a while, pretty much everything Sai King that was released in 2021 between Later and Billy Summers and the two different television series that we got, I think this was one of the best years. It wasn't the most populated year for King adaptations. That would definitely go to like, you know, either 19 or 17, both, you know, 2017, The Return of the King, 2019. But this was damn good. And if you're into gothic, slow burn period pieces that have a lot of intriguing factors going on, yes, some of them being soap opera-y with the cheating, you know, minister and with some of the other aspects, and, you know, most notably the nastiness of the racism. Aside from that, the addition of characters like the children and Rebecca and the constable and the younger minister and even the older minister, who is such a bigot and such a hateful person, just shooting himself and believing he's going to go to heaven, well, it might just be nothing on the other side. And yeah, that poisoning scene where his daughter kills the younger minister and him not getting the Salems Lot, or excuse me, the Jerusalem Lot. There's so much I could continue talking about with regards to this, and that's where maybe an episode by episode sort of thing like we're doing with Chucky right now, with a show like this, may have been better, because, you know, some places like Netflix drop everything at once, and then there's others that give you just a taste of a few episodes and then switch to a weekly sort of thing. And I don't know, there is something cool about watching week to week and just having that water cooler discussion, or seeing your favorite reviewer give their thoughts on it, and then you can comment and reciprocate. But guys, seek this out if you can, if you're in a region of the world where it's accessible, because I was so very impressed with it, and yeah, it's a pretty fun binge. So, I extend a grande gracias. I've been Jaime and Fuego. You can find me on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, here on YouTube. Obviously, a like, a share, a subscribe, all that good shizzle is most definitely appreciated. And yeah, recent reviews that we have done: Antlers, Dune, we're seeing last night in Soho tomorrow evening, which is the brand new film from Edgar Wright. So very excited. It's been an incredibly busy October. We're, as I said, also reviewing Chucky episode by episode. So bring it on, guys. And if you are in the Phoenix Metro, we are doing a horror show presents this upcoming Saturday, October 30th, at the Whiskey on Western. So if you are in any capacity to come out and see a live show with cosplayers and a bunch of your favorite homies from the horror show, and my cover band, Nancy and the Nightmares, is going to be doing a set as well, along with Agents of Lust, the Butt Honkies. We've got DJs, we've got all kinds of coolness going down. So yeah, if there is any possibility and you have any inclination, definitely come and check us out. It's greatly appreciated. So I've been Fuego. Y'all have been Rat Status. Don't forget about the book of the month, which is none other than Needful Things, which we will be talking about for its 30th anniversary next Tuesday, November 2nd. But until then, when the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, sin amigos, constant readers and viewers alike, say thank you. I'm hopeful we share more of this palaver sooner rather than later, and that we have been well met. Say thank you. And until then, remember to stay scared and read Stephen King, read Jerusalem's Lot. But honestly, this was a very cool, different turn of the wheel that we had in Chapelwaite.